Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Rookie Card Collector 123 video. In today's episode, we're going to continue my look at my journey to 310. That was the Baseball Hall of Fame Rookies collection, which I assembled between 2004 and 2014 on a pretty tight budget. So what I'm doing, continuing doing, is I'm going to talk about some of the major Hall of Famers, the inner circle guys, and also a few that are not inner circle, but some of them I had very unique items for, probably one of a kind items. So what I'm going to do is take you through my journey for these few players we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk to you about the rookie item for that player that I started with when I began the collection and what I finally ended up with, and how many times I upgraded or made changes over the years. So the first one we're going to look at is one of the Negro League Hall of Famers, Martin Dihigo. Dihigo was from Cuba and played a number of years in the U.S. Negro Leagues. He also starred in Latin America, overseas, not only in Cuba, but also in Mexico and Venezuela and the Dominican Republic. Just about anywhere they had baseball, Martin Dihigo was playing year-round. His U.S. Negro League days began in the mid-1920s with the Cuban Stars, as was the case with many of the baseball guys that came over from Cuba. Many of them that played in the Negro Leagues played for the Cuban Stars. There was a couple of different versions. There was the Cuban Stars East, the Cuban Stars West, and then ultimately in the 1930s, they sort of combined those two into just a Cuban Stars team going forward after that. So the first Martin Dihigo rookie I picked up, this one I actually did not get the Lachlan old-time Black Stars, the one that's from the 70s, because I was aware that he had an earlier card issued during the 40s. And he actually had a few cards in the 40s. The easiest one to find, and the one I ended up picking up initially, was a 1945 to 46 Caramello Deportivo. It's a small black and white square card of Dihigo. Printed in Cuba. This was a candy issue. They were caramel candy packages with the cards inside. He also had another Caramel Deportivo issued the next year in 46-47, which is a tougher, scarcer set to find. So the first Dihigo rookie that I was able to assemble was the 45-46 Caramello. I did know that after doing further research, there was earlier cards of him. They were more expensive and much rarer. So after figuring out exactly what the earliest card was, I tried to work my way back to that. Unfortunately, the earliest was a 1927 to 28 Mallorquina. That was another caramel card set issued in Cuba for baseball. There was 100 players in the set. The first 18, numbered 1 to 18, were professional Cuban players, and 19 through 100 were amateur players. For the most part, guys that you would not have heard of, even if you were a big Cuban baseball fan. So there was only one, I believe, at the time. There was one Dihigo known from that Mallorquina set, and then there were a couple of uncut sheets with the Dihigo card, of course, on it. Each uncut sheet had 100 cards, was a complete set. So that was an extremely tough one to ever come across. So I found out after that the next earliest Dihigo cards were from Venezuela. So during the early 30s, 31, 32, and 32, 33, and up to 34, there was a series or a few different series of Venezuelan League cards that were put out during the Winter League there. These were sets known as Doble Aguilas, and they all had Spanish writing on the back. They were, for the most part, they were all in-action shots. kind of like in the early 50s, the Toleteros Puerto Rican Winter League cards had in-action series. So this most of the time would have multiple players pictured on the card and some sort of action shot. And there was actually a total of 4 different Dihigo cards from those 31, 32, and 33 Venezuelan League issues, Doble Aguilas. One of them was more popular than any of the others. One of them actually pictured him on the card in his Hilldale Daisies uniform, which was his U.S. Negro League uniform. He probably had that uniform on that day because maybe there was an issue with his jersey with the Venezuelan club where he was playing at. So, for whatever reason, to the best of my knowledge, I believe that is still the only known Negro League baseball card picturing a Negro League ball player, not in a Winter League uniform, but in their actual U.S. Negro League uniform. So that out of the 4 Digos from 31 to 32 Venezuela, that is the most popular, most valuable. During one point at that collection, I had 3 out of the 4, including the Hilldale Daisies Dihigo card. The fourth one, I forget which one it was I was missing. I think it was him swinging in a batting pose. I found out a few years later in 34 or 34, 35 maybe, there was another Dihigo Venezuelan card, which was much rarer than the others that existed. I never had that one. I never came across that one either. So further into my journey, now we're more like in the 2010 or so range, and I'm still looking for the Mallorquina, but that one is virtually impossible. So around 2010 or so, I come across an auction for a Cuban team premium from 1922 to 23, which had Dihigo on the team premium, and this was it's a real photograph. It was on a thicker cardboard stock than a normal premium, which is more of a paper stock. But anyway, the Dihigo premium also had Pop Lloyd on the team in the image, as well as Dick Cannonball Redding. Lloyd is another Hall of Famer from the Negro Leagues. Redding is not in the Hall of Fame, but a top Negro League pitcher during the teens and 20s, and almost certainly is going to get into the Hall of Fame one day when they have another Negro League election. So fortunately, I was able to pick up that team premium from Cuba from 22, 23, picturing Dihigo. That was really his rookie season. So that replaced the Venezuelan cards. I ended up selling the 3 of those, as well as the Caramello Deportivo, which I had sold a while back once I got the Venezuelan cards. And that ended up being my final Martin Dihigo rookie representation in the collection, was the 22-23 Cuban team premium. I believe it was Habana. I'm not 100% sure. So the next player we're going to talk about is another really interesting one. This is Joe DiMaggio, another inner circle top tier Hall of Famer, New York Yankees center fielder. Everybody's pretty familiar with him, I'm sure. DiMaggio, the first rookie card I picked up after researching, I was aware that he had a couple of different issues from Gaudi in 1936. They were called premiums. They were sort of about the same size as a postcard. So they were not real oversized, but they were bigger than a standard size card. And they were fairly affordable. So initially I picked up the portrait image, 36 Gaudi, a premium. And those are broken up into 4 types, a type 1, 2, 3, and 4. When I started the collection, I wasn't really an expert on those Gaudi premiums. I didn't realize there was 4 different types. I thought it was just all part of the same, big set. So I picked up the portrait of DiMaggio, and I guess a year or so later on Net54, somebody posted a thread about the Gaudi premiums and how there's 4 different types and how you could identify the differences for each one. So after looking into that a little more, I realized my portrait was a type 4, which was the last issue from that series, and those were done in 37, not 36. So since DiMaggio had other 36 rookies, it really was not a true rookie. So I set out to find one of the 36 issues, and I ended up, I came close to buying one of the R312s. Those were the pastel color oversized premiums at one point, but I didn't pick that one up. But later on, I would pick up the R314 two-player card that had DiMaggio and Joe McCarthy, who was the manager for the Yankees when DiMaggio was on the team. And those two were in a black and white image, horizontal image, and that was my DiMaggio rookie at that point. Fast forward a couple of years later, now we're like 2008, 2009. I'm starting to add Z-Nuts, even though they're minor league cards. They predate, in most cases, the earliest major league card of a player. And a lot of times those are actually more valuable than the true major league rookie card. So I'm looking at this point for DiMaggio Z-Nut, and I know that there's two of them out there. One of them seems to be tougher to find than the other. There's a throwing pose, which was issued, I believe, in 35. Both of the cards were from the very last Z-Nut series, which ran from 1933 to 36, so it ran for about 4 years. The throwing pose DiMaggio, I believe, was from 35, might have been 34. The batting pose was the earliest one. That one, I believe, was 1933. So the batting pose was the earliest quote-unquote professional baseball image of DiMaggio. So the first one I ended up picking up was the throwing pose DiMaggio. And as I've mentioned in previous episodes, the Z-Nuts were issued with coupons on the bottom where you could get discounts for them. But most of the people would cut off the coupons and submit those to get the discounts on the product. And therefore, almost all the baseball player cards were missing the coupons at the bottom. So I never had a DiMaggio Z-Nut with the coupon still attached. Mine were without. So I got a throwing pose in an auction not too long after that. At that time, those were going for around $3,000, $4,000. Still kept my eyes open for the batting because I knew that was an earlier version. A couple of years later, now around 2010 or so, 2011, I came across a batting that I was lucky enough to win in an auction, so I sold the throwing pose, bought the batting. They were pretty similar in price. The batting was a bit higher, maybe $1,000 or $2 more. And I had that one. At the same time, I also was aware there was another DiMaggio, even rarer than either one of the Z-Nuts. And that was a 1935. It was called the Pebble Beach Clothier, which was a clothing company. They were also in the San Francisco West Coast area where DiMaggio played in the PCL. That's where the Z-Nut cards were issued and distributed from. So this Pebble Beach Clothier DiMaggio card, there was only maybe in pop reports showed 3 or 4 total that existed. And every one of them was autographed by DiMaggio. There was no unsigned cards in any population report. So the deduction was that he was at the clothing store for some sort of promotion one day, maybe signing autographs for fans or whatever. And they had DiMaggio sign the cards and then gave them away to people that came to the event that day. And that would account for why all the DiMaggio cards that exist are signed cards. A couple of those came up for auction over the years when I was doing the rookie collection back then. And they all, I didn't have a pressing need to get it because it was not earlier than the Z-Nut cards, which I had. So I never really pursued it too much. But today I have not seen one come up for sale or auction in probably the last 10 years now. I don't think even the Masters, Joe DiMaggio Master Set collectors, I'm not sure very many of them even know that that card exists. It's so scarce. But never picked that one up. My final version was the Z-Nut batting, which was the earliest professional Joe DiMaggio card. And everything else got sold off over the years to fund other purchases from the collection. The next one I'm going to talk about is Jimmy Foxx. So Jimmy Foxx, of course, slugging first baseman for the Philadelphia Athletics from the late 20s, mid 20s, late 20s through the 30s. Went to Boston after that. Played for the Red Sox into the mid 40s before retiring. And Fox was one of the early 500 home run club members. Batted well over 300 for his career and put up pretty comparable numbers to Lou Gehrig, although the Lou Gehrig story and all kind of puts his cards in a much higher stratosphere than Jimmy Foxx as far as value, rookie cards, and all that. So Jimmy Foxx, the first rookie I picked up for him at the time, it was a W560. Those were strip cards. They came in a uncut sheet of about 20 or 25 on a panel. And they were in the form of playing cards. So they would have like a diamond, a spade, a club, or a heart with the player image, a small circular image portrait in the center of the card. And the rest of it would look like a playing card, a deck of playing cards type of thing. There was a Babe Ruth in there. There was a Lou Gehrig in there, all the big stars from that period. So Fox was in there. It was a 27 W560. And as far as pinning down in a specific year, that was really the earliest MLB card of Jimmy Foxx. So that's what I picked up. Again, maybe a year or two later, Net 54, I was reading a thread in there, and somebody was questioning the date of the W560 set. Were they actually issued in 1927, or was it more likely later than that? So after matching up some of the team and player designations that they played for, it was determined that the set was more likely a 1929, maybe 1930 even issue, not a 1927. So that set me out to looking for, okay, well, what's the earliest Fox? What's my rookie card to go after? So upon further research, I came up with the 26 to 29, the postcard back exhibit of Fox, which is a horizontal fielding pose. And I decided that was going to be my rookie card of choice. So I set out to look for that. At that time, those were in the mid hundreds. So I ended up picking one up. It was probably a 1.5 or so. Again, most of the cards in my collection were low grade because with the budget I was working with and having 310 Hall of Famers to collect, I could not afford to spend a lot of money for nice condition cards. So I picked up an exhibit, lower grade, and it was probably in the $400 range from what I recall. And that was my Fox representation. And 2 or 3 years later, I was looking at a RMY auction. RMY is a company that does strictly photos, mostly type 1 photos, but they also do some of the other types 2, 3, 4. A lot of times they identify their own type and give it a designation as opposed to submitting to PSA and relying on PSA to do it. RMY is a very experienced photograph auction house, and they judge the photograph types on their own for the most part. So anyway, I looking through their stuff, and I come across a 1922 Easton team. I believe it was a professional baseball minor league team, like a low A ball team. I'm not 100% sure. It could have been an amateur or a town club. But it was an Easton team out of, I think, Maryland. And it had Jimmy Foxx pictured in there. And it was obviously Fox in the image, really young, still a teenager. And that was predating my exhibit postcard by probably about 5 years or so. So I decided if I could pick up this image, I would sell the exhibit, and I believe I got it relatively cheap. It was probably somewhere between $100 and $200. So I picked it up. That was my Fox representation. Probably couldn't never find anything earlier than that, and probably a one of a kind again. So I sold off my Fox exhibit rookie, which probably brought me 500 or so. So again, that turnover of cards put another 300, 400 in my pocket to spend on a card where there's no other alternative and I have to pay up to get, somebody I need. So that would be my final Jimmy Foxx representation in the collection. It was a Type 1 team photograph from the Easton, Maryland baseball club, either amateur or minor league. So I'm going to cut off here. I'm just going to do a few stories each episode until I get through my list of Hall of Famers. Again, just covering the major top tier guys. Eventually, I'm planning on probably doing a player by player run of episodes and documenting every single player, not just the big names, but the other guys too. What I picked up from the beginning of the collection, what I finally finished with in the collection, and kind of take you through the road, through my eyes, and why I did what I did and bought what I bought at the time. So again, hope you enjoyed today's episode. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys again on the next one.